When our pet cat named Tibbles passed away a few years ago, I was devastated. Me, my husband and 4-year-old son loved him very much. He had thick black fur and was always there to comfort you when you wanted a cuddle, and was always very friendly and playful with my young son. Then one day, a few weeks after Tibbles had passed away, I was standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes, whilst looking out of the window, watching my son playing on his small 3-wheeled bike in the front garden. I could have sworn the garden gate was closed, but when I heard my son scream and looked up from the kitchen sink, to my horror, I saw a dog with its jaws locked onto my son's leg, and it was shaking him around like a rag doll. I dropped the glass I was holding onto the kitchen floor and ran out to the garden, screaming and shouting, trying to scare the dog away, but it wouldn't let go of my son's leg. Then out of nowhere, a black cat ran at the dog, hissing, screeching and scratching, and the dog released my son's leg and ran out of the garden. I immediately picked my crying son up and saw to his leg, which was bleeding. Later that evening, after my son had been treated at the hospital, I was talking to my husband about it and told him I could have sworn that the cat that saved our son was Tibbles, our cat who had passed away a few weeks before. My husband reasoned that it couldn't have been, and that it was just another cat who looked similar to Tibbles. I suppose it was the only logical explanation. But the next morning, when I woke my son up, he asked me where Tibbles was. I reminded him that Tibbles had died a few weeks before. He said that Tibbles had slept on his bed during the night and had tickled him with his fur. This happened back in the 1960s when I was an 11-year-old boy. I lived in a council house with my parents and older sister in the north of England. We had a black Labrador dog called Jake. Jake was one of the family and we all loved him very much. He was very playful and was always running around with me and my sister. One day I was playing on the street with a football. Me and a friend of mine were kicking it back and forth and Jake was playing too, trying to catch it in his mouth. The ball bounced onto the road and Jake chased after it. We called out his name to try and stop him, but it was too late. A car rammed straight into him. I rushed to Jake's side, who was laying still on the road, and had tears in my eyes as I watched him die. My dad buried Jake in the back garden, and later that night I cried myself to sleep on my pillow. The next night I was lying in bed trying to get to sleep when I heard a noise, like a dog whimpering. I sat up in bed and heard it again, so I put on my slippers and dressing gown and went downstairs. The noise was coming from outside, and there was also a scratching sound coming from the back door, so I turned the key and opened it and got the shock of my life. Jake was sitting there excitedly wagging his tail. I rushed out to him, but he backed away. Then we playfully chased each other around the garden, but there was no physical contact. Every time I went to stroke him, he would just playfully run away. This continued for the next few nights. I would wait for the whimpering and scratching sounds, then I would creep downstairs to go out and play with Jake. I never told anyone because I didn't think anyone would believe me. But one night my sister saw me creeping down the stairs, so I told her about the sounds and that it was Jake waiting outside in the garden. She didn't believe me, but when I opened the door, she too saw Jake with her own eyes. This happened for another few more nights, with me and my sister going out to the garden in the middle of the night to see Jake. Then it just stopped. Jake wasn't there anymore. No sounds, nothing. We never did tell our parents, but me and my sister still speak about it occasionally. And as we approach old age, we often wonder if it was all just our childhood imagination, or it was indeed Jake's spirit that we had seen. When I was a child, I used to visit my grandma every Sunday for dinner. But before we ate, we would go for a walk through nearby fields, and we would take carrots and apples to feed 2 horses that were kept in a field. The 2 horses were quite old, but were always very happy to see us. They would come trotting over to us at the fence and eat out of our hands, and they would let us stroke their noses. There was a black one and a white one. We never knew their real names, so we named them Pudding and Snowy. Then one Sunday we set out as usual on our walk with a carrier bag full of carrots and apples. But when we approached the field, we could see only one horse. It was Pudding, the black one, and instead of trotting over to us, he stood near a tree, occasionally moving about quickly as if he was playing. No matter how much we called to him, he wouldn't leave the tree. So my grandma emptied the carrots and apples onto the ground, and we continued our walk. The next Sunday we walked to the field, but this time we saw the 2 horses. They were playfully chasing each other around the field, but when we called out to them, they ignored us and carried on playing. My grandma and I thought it was very strange that after almost a year of visiting them, that they should all of a sudden begin to ignore us. When the next Sunday came and we went to the field again, like the Sunday before last, there was only one horse, and that was the black one, and like then he was standing alone by the tree. As we were about to leave, a woman came walking up to us, carrying a bucket and some hay. My grandma asked where the white horse was. The woman replied that the horse had died about 2.5 weeks ago. Apologetic but puzzled, we told the woman we had seen both of the horses in the field 2 Sundays ago. She told us that wasn't possible because the horse had died a few days before then, that it was buried underneath the tree where the black horse was now standing.